In this lecture, we're going to cover the concept of demand, supply, and market equilibrium. The chapter going to introduce you to those concepts. Both the demand and the supply are defined. We're also going to illustrate the equilibrium, price equilibrium, quantity will be discussed. We'll see some of the application of the concept by bringing in price control concepts such as price floor and price ceiling. Okay, so again, the demand, the content of the chapter, we're going to look at it. Market, define the market. We're going to explore the demand and illustrate the concept of demand. We'll do the same thing for supply and the market equilibrium. We'll look at change in supply, change in demand, and what are the implications on the equilibrium. Okay, so what is a market? Usually people tend to look at market as a physical or place, right? So whatever we have interaction between someone wants something and someone selling something is a market, right? So I just don't want you guys to limit yourself to a physical place. The market can be virtual. It can be just I pick up a call and call somebody, want something that the person have to sell. So we have a local market, national market, and international market as well. And on the market, that's where the price is discovered in the interaction of buyers and sellers. Okay. So the demand is defined as a schedule, right? Schedule that have the data of price and quantity demanded, or a curve that show you the various amount of product that consumers are willing and able to purchase at each of a series of possible price and during a limited time period, right? We will look at a demand schedule, show us a table with the data on it, and converting that table into a graph, talk about demand curve, right? So we're gonna look at a schedule and we're gonna convert a schedule into a graph, which is gonna be the demand curve. So, and the curve is defined as the amount consumers are willing and able to purchase at a given price, assuming that other thing equal. What we mean by that is, as we're looking at the demand for particular product, you focus on the variable rolling into or impacting the quantity demanded for that particular product. In our example here, we talk about the demand, individual demand of a good. We look at the price, variable price, and the quantity demanded. Other thing outside of those two variables, we're gonna assume that they are constant, right? Other thing equal. So we look at it and see how the two variables are interacted. The law of demand, other thing equal, as price falls, quantity demanded rises, and as price rises, quantity demanded falls. Here you see that indirect or inverse relationship between the quantity demanded and the price of a good. And why we tend to buy more quantity of particular good when the price is down is because the price acts as obstacle to the buyers. We, consumers, are the ones spending the money. And since we know that we have a limited budget, if a thing costs less money, you have that flexibility with your budget to purchase more. But if the thing costs more on the market, you are limited because of, again, what we talked about before, the limitation or the scarcity of the resource of your budget. Also, the law of diminishing marginal utility is one of the explanation of that inverse relationship as well. The income effect is what I alluded to. Income limited, if your income limited, if the price of commodity on the market falls, you have more flexibility due to that limitation you have in your income. Substitution effort here is related to the fact that we have a large substitute on the market, right? So substitute the market, if the price of one particular item substitute, the price fall, you will see that the quantity demanded of the other substitute where the price is now, the price is still the same, the quantity demanded gonna fall for that one also. Why? Because of, again, the limitation we have in our budget. So let's see illustration of the demand curve, and we'll look at also the demand schedule. This little table over here, and the first column represents the price of this. Here's the demand for corn, and the second column is the quantity demanded. You can see here that is purely a good illustration of the law of demand. As the price falls, you see the quantity demanded rises, and as the price rises, the quantity demanded falls. If you transpose this information into the graph, the first step to plot a schedule into a graph is to identify the axis. Here by convention, we have a price as the vertical one and the quantity as the horizontal. So each combination of the two variable price and quantity, the first one is a phi, price of phi, the corresponding quantity demand is 10. So if you project this variable, you will see that the above projection will join at a point when you have your first dot, which will represent the first combination of a price and quantity. So you do the same, and you have all this dot. And to conclude, you just, with a smooth line, join all the dot, and you have your demand schedule. Okay, so now moving from individual demand to the market demand. In our simplistic example here, we have the prices, the first column, and you have the quantity demanded by each individual on the market here, right? So assuming that we have only 3 individuals on the market, Joe, Jen, and Jay, they all express a different quantity at each price level. So the summation of this quantity at each price level give you the market demand per week for corn, in our case over here. So at 5, altogether express a demand of 30. At 4, they express a demand of 60, so and so. Okay, so now the change in the demand, anything that change the demand schedule. Here, when we say change in the demand, one thing I want to bring your attention is it's different from the change in the quantity demanded. The quantity demanded are this, that, throughout the same demanded schedule, right? D1 have all the quantity demanded. But the demand itself is the schedule D1, D2, and D3. So the change in the demand here gonna be the shift of the entire schedule. So if the demand increase, for instance, we will have the shift up, right, from D1 to D2. If the demand decrease, it will shift down to D3. So here are the determinant of demand. Determinant of demand or anything beside the price that change the demand, anything outside of other things equal that we talked about before, that can shift the demand up and down, right? The change in consumer taste and preference. If the consumer have a different taste or preferences, right? If they have a preference toward the product that you offer them, the demand gonna increase. But if they dislike what you offer them, the demand gonna decrease. The number of buyers on the market, more buyers, eventually demand gonna increase. Less buyers, the demand gonna decrease. The change in the income as well, right? More money you get, you tend to purchase more because you increase your flexibility in the income side. So here, the change in the income, normal good are the good that we usually purchase. And if your income increase, you tend to purchase more of a normal good. But the inferior good are the good that we purchase less when our income increases. Okay. So if your income increases, are the good that you purchase less. Right. So one good example of inferior good can be, for instance, let's say you have your heating system is powered by oil. As more money you get, your income increases, you tend to shift your heating system to clean energy, for instance. That's one example. So the system powered by oil become inferior good to you, right? Change in the prices of a related good. Here we alluded to the complementary good and the substitute good. Complementary good are the good that you use jointly. So if the price of one increases, the quantity demand of the other one gonna go down, because if you purchase that one, you still have to purchase the expensive good. While the substitute good are the good that you use either or, and it give you same or similar satisfaction. So in that particular case, one good example of substitute good gonna be Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. So if the price of Pepsi-Cola increases on the market, right, you can see that people will shift their purchase to a Coke. So the Coke, the quantity of demand of the Coke are gonna go higher. The demand for Coke gonna increase, right? Because people want more for their money, they're gonna shift their purchase toward the less expensive good on the market. Change in consumer expectation. Right here, the expectation also will shift the demand. Right? If you're optimistic about the future and the price gonna be higher in the future, probably you want to slow down your demand today. And similar, if you're optimistic about the future that you're gonna earn more income in the future, that also can impact your demand. So you tend to save less and consume more because you know that the future coming, you're gonna earn more income. This slide over here summarizes all we say related to the determinant, and also I have example on the side. So I want you guys to refer to this slide, and that summarizes everything we say related to the demand. So now we're gonna shift our learning to supply. Right, first we define supply. What is a supply? So again, as we say, related to the demand, supply is a schedule or curve that shows you the various amount of a product that producers are willing and able to make available for sale at each of a series of possible prices during a specified time period. So we look at the demand schedule, and also as what we did we look at the supply schedule, similar to what we did for the demand schedule, right? And also the supply curve, right? Again, the schedule here, supply schedule, the amount producers are willing and able, right? You might be willing to sell something. Are you able to sell it? The ability here is related to the cost, right? While the ability for the demand is related to and also the market demand, as what we did for the individual supply, and the market supply as what we did for the demand. So the law of supply, right? Other thing equal, as the price rises, the quantity supply rises, and as the price falls, the quantity supply fall. So what we see here is the same direction. The price and the quantity supply move in the same direction, and you see that positive slope, right? Upsloping curve. And why that? Because here the price act as an incentive to the producer. The producer earning the money are the one getting the revenue. So if the price, we know that the revenue is the price times quantity. If the price is higher on the market, they want to sell more, right? They want to sell more. So the supply curve, we have the supply schedule. Again, our example of corn. So the first column being in the price of the market, and the second column here are the quantity supply. So you will see that both variables here move in the same direction. And that reflect on the graph over here is absolute graph, the supply schedule or the supply curve, right? So now let's see the shifter of the supply, anything that change the supply curve. So an increase in the supply will move the supply schedule or supply curve to the right. So from S1 to S2, a decrease in supply, you will see a movement from from S1 to S3, which is a movement to the left. So here are the determinant of supply, anything that can change the supply schedule, supply curve. So change in the resource prices. So we know that the resource are what the supplier will use to produce the output, which is a product. So if the price of those resources change, that will impact the cost of production. Eventually, they're going to impact the quantity that the supplier will put on the market. Changing technology, better technology, supplier can use the same resources but produce more, right? Increase the productivity. That will help supplier to produce more. And with the mind that the idea is to maximize the profit, they will use technology to maintain or reduce the cost of production and produce more. The number of sellers, if the number of suppliers increase on the market, eventually the supply can also increase. Change in taxes and subsidies. Taxes here are part of the supplier cost of production, right? And if higher taxes, higher costs, the supplier gonna incur, so probably lower supply they're gonna put on the market. The subsidies work as inverse of taxes, right? Giving money to the supplier by reducing the cost of production, so they will tend to produce more. Change in prices of other goods. So think about the substitute and the complement, for instance, right? Changing the price of other good. If the supplier can use the same resources to produce a good that sell at higher prices on the market, why you think the supplier gonna use those resources to produce something that the price is low on the market, right? So if the price change, that also gonna impact the way the supplier gonna supply, or the producer gonna supply the market. The change in the producer expectation is work similar to the consumer expectation. If the producer expects something better in the future, they're gonna plan accordingly to that. If they are not optimistic about the future, they are pessimistic, also that's gonna impact the supply, the quantity or the amount of supply put on the market. The determinant of supply. These are all the factors that shift the supply curve, right? Everything we talk about, again, this table summarize and give you the determinant and also the example of each determinant. Now we move to the next, the third concept we want to cover is the market equilibrium, right? The market equilibrium. I want to just kind of bring your attention to the fact that when you define market equilibrium, stay away from the fact that you see students say, well, the market equilibrium is where the supply curve is equal to the demand curve. It's incorrect because they are not equal, but they intersect. It's when both cross, right? that point of a junction, that's where you have the equilibrium. So keep that in mind. And anything outside of that equilibrium will generate either a surplus or a shortage, right? So at that equilibrium, that's where you make a efficient use of the scarce resources we have. So we're going to talk about efficient allocation of resources as well. So talking about efficient allocation of resources, we have a two kind, the productive efficiency. So the productive efficiency, it just push you to find a technology and an innovative idea to produce at least cost. So you want to produce at least cost so you can sell on a competitive market. So the productive efficiency here is producing good in least cost way, using the best technology or those innovative ideas, and also find the right mix of resources, combine labor with capital. What is the quantity of labor you need? What is the quantity of capital you need to be able to produce the output and deliver that to the market at a very competitive price, okay? And the allocative efficiency here related to, again, the idea of a scarce resources. Use those scarce resources to produce the right mix of a good that the market value or the society value the most, right? So you have to keep those two together, productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. So the equilibrium, as I pointed out before, so you have the demand curve and the supply curve, and you see that there's a intersection here when both, right, across. So at this point here, we have the equilibrium. We have an example here, the equilibrium is where we have 7,000 per week of bushel at a price of $3. So anything outside of is going to generate a shortage or generate a surplus. So let's look at a case of shortage, for instance. The price, equilibrium price is 3. Let's say there's a regulation that change or force this equilibrium of $3 to $2. How consumer going to behave? Here, if you project the two all to meet the supply schedule, you see that at $2, what's going to happen? The supplier or the producer are going to want to produce per week 4,000. And in the same time, what the consumer going to want, they're going to want something like 11,000. So there's a shortage because the price is being lower than the equilibrium producer, let's say by producing less. And the consumer, since they will take advantage of a low price, they want more. So everybody have a different interest. So the producer are going to want to produce less because of, again, the ability and the willingness to produce, right? They may have that willingness to produce, but they are not able to produce because the price may be below the cost. So they produce less, and a consumer here want more. So that creates the rational function of prices or the ability of all the competitive force of demand and supply to get to that price at which both the buyer and the seller decision are coherent, right, are consistent. So we will look at the change in equilibrium, price and equilibrium quantity when there's a change in the demand. And we're going to do the same thing with supply change, whole other thing equal. And if the supply change, what going to be the impact on the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity? So the first graph over here is if the demand increase from the first equilibrium here, the demand increase from D1 to D2, what happened to the equilibrium price? Original equilibrium was here, the new equilibrium here. So what happened to the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity? In our case here, supply being the same, if the demand increase, you will see that equilibrium price will increase and the equilibrium quantity will increase as well. And if the demand decrease, the opposite will happen. Both will decrease. So if we look at the supply, the change in the supply, the demand being the same, if the supply increase, you will see that here that the first equilibrium, original equilibrium, and the new equilibrium, you see that the equilibrium price decreases and the equilibrium quantity increases. And if the supply decrease, we see that the equilibrium price increases and the equilibrium quantity decreases. Okay. So this is a recapitulative of the change, the shift in the supply, shift in the demand. But in certain case, you won't be able to determine which way the equilibrium will move. It will depend on the way of one shift over the other one. Okay, so the applicability that I mentioned earlier of the concept, we'll see example of a government setting prices, example of price ceiling, right? So what is a price ceiling? Price ceilings are the maximum prices that can be charged on a good, right? So if a government established that price ceiling, mean that that's a maximum. Anything above that is become illegal, right? You have to charge up to that maximum. Okay, and when you do that, the rationing function of prices won't work anymore because there's a regulation in the market that set a price, right? And if that price is set below the equilibrium price of the market, you will see that that's gonna distort the market and generate black market and the rationing problem of the market as well. So if we go and look at it on the graph over here, example of a price ceiling. So if you look at this graph, you see that the equilibrium set by the market is at 350 and the quantity is at Q sub 0, right? So let's say there's a maximum price ceiling set at $3, which is below the market price of 350. So again, if you do the same exercise we did before, you will see that in this particular case, the supplier gonna supply QS, which is less than what the consumer wants, and that's gonna create a shortage on the market. This is an example of rent control, or government set a price below the market price. People gonna want a lot of units for rent, and the landlord gonna provide a little bit to the market, and that's gonna generate a shortage and ultimately a black market. Okay, here's the other example of a price, a government setting price, the case of price floor. In this example over here is one example of a price floor would be setting the minimum wage law, right? So the price floor is the minimum price fixed by a government, right? The price at that price or above the price floor is illegal. So anything on that price, the minimum or above that minimum is illegal. Anything below that is illegal. So you cannot pay people below the minimum wage, right? So let's look at the price floor on the graph also. So here, the supply of labor, example of labor, and the demand for labor, the equilibrium at quantity Q sub 0 and the price of 2. So you can see that if government get involved and set a minimum wage way above the market price of labor, they're gonna create surplus. People gonna put themselves on the market, gonna supply labor to the market, but the businesses that want those labor gonna demand less labor, right? So they're gonna create surplus of labor on the market. So now we shift to the last word of the chapter that give you a good example of the jump we see in college tuition, right? The college cost, the tuition cost today. If you look at the data from 1971, 1972, where the public education is around 1,400 and the private about 3,000 to now 2017, 2018, you can see the shift. The public education went from 1,405 to almost 25,000, and the private from 3,000 to 50,000. So what you guys think explain that jump in the tuition? The college professor are making those money, or there's a lot investment in the college, the books and all those things. So what economy discover is throughout the research, you can see here that for each dollar increase in loan, that increase the college cost by 70 cents. So now if you're, instead of making a loan easier for student, so think about it, if government use that money to invest more in colleges, so they can create competition or a competitive market of colleges and university. Probably that may solve that problem, right? Because if you go to this particular college and it's expensive, you have option to go to the next one. So they all provide you competitive education. They're gonna be competitive actually because of the law of competition gonna run between them. So the suggestion here, instead of making loan easy for student, they can use that money to supply colleges, right, instead of subsidizing student loan. That's the end of this